we go. So I've got rocks, and those rocks, I'm just going to set them as a stencil. And when you set it up as a stencil, you can go in projection mode and adjust the size of this projection, maybe a bit bigger, so we can see the rocks. And then I can start to project that onto the surface. So that's the idea here. So that's what I've done. So I'm going to turn off the stencil. I've created rocks for the details of that surface. I've created cracks for this area here. And then I added some dirt there, and that's what we want to use for our final. Of course, if you want to send that back to 3ds Max, you don't want to send all of these polygons.
Right.
It's way too much, and it's not worth it. So what we want to do is, for the painting, you just right-click and say Send Channel as PSD file. So all the layers will be brought in as PSD. Or what you can do, and that's what we've done here, because I want to reassemble that in 3ds Max, I've exported all of the paint layers separately. So because we did that, you see that we're going to get a good starting point to create a material. Also, what we want to do is we go here and extract texture map. And what it does, it takes the eye-level geometry and it creates an ambient occlusion map. So it gives you all of the shadow details of that high-resolution map. Then we also have a displacement map, and that displacement map will give you the height of everything on the model. And also a normal map that will give you the direction of the normal. With this data, I don't need to use an high-resolution mesh anymore. I can use those to create exactly the same thing on the low-res mesh, and it's going to look exactly the same at render time.
Great.
So let's take a look at this. We have a, oops, it was closed down. So go back here into my folder and grab my scene assets, images, and Mudbox texture. So those are the texture we got from Mudbox. We got the ambient occlusion, displacement, the normal, and all the 3 layers of paint that I did. So I'm going to go back here into my material editor, and I'm just going to maximize this view. And now we're going to create a new material from scratch, and you get the idea of how we create a material with 3ds Max. So I'm going to grab my materials. I'm going to say, well, we need those 3 paint layers. I'm going to say the first one here, the rocks will be here, the cracks are here. So the crack already did that. So I'm going to bring in the, so those are the 3 that I want to bring up to my diffuse map. And then we're going to grab the ambient occlusion map, the displacement map, and the normal map. So we've got to combine all of these maps to create our final material. You've got different types of material inside of Max. Standard material, we've got a list of them. Mental ray material, we've got a whole list of them. We've got even Autodesk material that will give you quick access to very realistic material for common surfaces. But my goal here is I'm going to use an Arch and Design shader. We've got all of the connections that we can use to create our material. The displacement map here, I'm just going to feed it the displacement map, and it's going to be there. The bump map, I'm going to tell the computer that it's a normal map that's coming in. So bump map as a normal, and we have that done for that. Now I want to combine all of these maps here into a single map for the diffuse color. So for that, I'm just going to use a composite map, and it's basically a compositor of multiple layers inside of 3ds Max. So we're just going to maximize this so we can see what's happening. Right now we only have 1 layer, but I've got 4 textures to combine together. So I'm going to create 4 layers total. And we've got now all of the inputs that we can use to feed in that data. So my layer number 1 will be the rocks. So I'm going to bring that in. We've got our rocks. I want to bring in the cracks on top. So I'm going to go here and say bring the cracks. We're going to get the cracks here. The third one will be the dust or the dirt that we've painted on top. And the last one here will be the ambient occlusion that we've extracted from Mudbox. Going to put that in layer number 4. And you see the ambient occlusion appears on top of everything. It doesn't have a transparency channel. So we're going to go back here and say, I want to apply this layer as multiply. So we've got all the blending mode that you're used to in common paint applications. So my composite feeds into the diffuse color. We've got our material here. That's our final material. I can drag the output out and say that's going to be the material for my object.
Great.
I can enable in the viewport, and now you have all of the details inside of your inside of Max. Now, if you render this, just to give you an idea, it's going to look like this. Because we have a displacement, you see all the cracks there, all the details. We've got the shadows, and we've got all the detail of the paint. So by just using Mudbox, you can have high detail level modeling for this.
So you've got all these different pieces that you've created. Now you want to actually put them together and create a camera move, and then send everything back into Smoke.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing we need to do first before because we have.
I forgot one element.
Because we want to send back to Smoke all of the rendered layers. We also want to be able to send geometry that we'll be able to update later in Smoke to change like the flag logos and all of that.
Right, because Smoke is much more than an editor. It also has these 3D capabilities. Of course, it's in the Autodesk family, so you'd expect that.
Yeah.
But you can actually import geometries, and you'll create a couple of geometries for that process.
Yeah, so what I want to do is to send back to Smoke the flags, 3D flags. I'm going to grab just an editable spline. Like we did extrude it a bit before, I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to say I want to create a garment, and the garment is just subdividing it so that it gives you good cloth simulation. I'm going to give a bit more density. We've got a bit more cloth there, and I'm going to apply a UV map material, a UV map to it so that it maps correctly onto this flag. I've got a material ready, and it's a substance-based material. So substance is a procedural texture or an intelligent bitmap provider, I would say.
Right.
So instead of creating all the maps in Mudbox like we did before, it generates, from a single substance, we can have all of those. We've got 81 of them that ships with Max, concrete, brick wall, all of that. They feed the diffuse, the specular, the bump, so that's how we created this material here. So I'm going to grab the output of this material that has the bump, the specular, and the diffuse, drop it onto this character. Yes, I want to rename this, okay. And we're going to show it in the viewport, and we have a fabric pattern onto this material, onto the object. So if I want to change the pattern of this material, I can just go here and say change the pattern, and it's going to change all of the map at once. And what's great about this workflow, the substance workflow, is now that I've assigned a substance to the object, when we're going to go to Smoke, the substance will load as well with all of the maps. So we can reuse that later in Smoke if we want to. Okay, so if we want to do a cloth simulation with this, I'm just going to grab it. I'm going to hang it onto that position here. And we're going to grab the object itself. I'm going to apply the cloth modifier. The cloth has a tool called grouping. So basically what you can do is grab a few vertices here, and I say these here will be just preserved. That means that they're going to stay there. They're not going to be, they're just going to hang the cloth in that position. Then you can go in the object properties and tell it what type of cloth you want it to be. So we've got all sorts of fabrics here. I'm going to use silk. It's the one that's going to give me the best movement for this setup. And then you can add some forces. That's what's going to give you the noise. So I've got a few winds in there. Okay. And then we can start to simulate local so that it uses the wind, and it's going to give you a starting position for your simulation so it doesn't start straight. Now that we're ready to go, just say simulate, and it's going to create the simulation for all the frames. Of course, we're not going to wait for all the frames, so I'm just going to say cancel here. But my goal is, so now we've got 10 frames animation. If I want to be able to send that to Smoke, I have to send it in a language that it will understand. So what I'll do here is I'll just grab a point cache modifier like we did before, and I'm going to go here and say new, and I'm just going to grab a flag here, whatever. I'm going to override this one, that's fine. And then I'm going to record the animation. And once the animation is recorded, I can go at this level here and say collapse that to an editable mesh. Now we have an editable mesh with a point cache. All of this will be very easy to export to Smoke. So the final one for the flag looks like this. We've got two flags side by side. We've got a structure that holds them, and we've got this animation data, and it's all point cache, which means that we're going to be able to export that to Smoke as 3D objects, animated 3D objects.
And you'll use the film box or the FBX format for that. Okay.
So now we're ready to send everything back to Smoke and go back to finalize this, to finish this in Smoke. So what we have is the full environment. We've got light beams in the back. We've got fireworks. We've got the crowd cheering. We've got all of this. We've got the camera move, the flags, the foreground, everything.
It's a big scene. You built all of this yourself in front of us. So
yeah,
it's great.
So I'm going to go into the camera view to give you an idea of how we're going to send this to 3ds Max. I'm going to turn off the edge faces and show you that in Max we've got I've been working in shaded view since the beginning. Now I'm going to go in the realistic view, and it's going to give me all of the shading, all of the shadows and everything. So it's a good way to adjust lighting, make decisions about how your scene is going to look. Everything is visible in the viewport, which is great. So what I'm going to send back to Smoke, I'm going to send a few rendered passes. So the first one, I'm just going to render just the sky by itself. I've got a gradient there with stars and all of that. Then I'll render the fireworks, and I'll do a few passes. So this is my first pass, the one we did together, but I can create a few variations of that, and I'm going to send that as separate passes. And then we're going to go here, and I'm going to send you the light beams as a separate pass as well.
Right.
We're going to send you the crowd, and the crowd, you see that we're going to get some transparency there, and we're going to use that transparency to do some advanced effects in Smoke later. And then what I'll do here is I'll send you the platform as the front, so that's going to be also rendered. So all of these will be rendered to the sent to Smoke that with alpha channel so that we can combine them together later. But what I can do as well is, and that's what we've mentioned a bit before, is I want to be able to send all of that geometry to Smoke to be able to reuse later. So we've got a camera move here, so that's what I want to send as a reference to Smoke. I want to send those flags, and I want to send the lights and the structure because we want to be able to update that later. So I'm going to grab all of this, go here and say export, export selected, and we're going to choose the Autodesk Fbx format. So if I save this, we're going to say we want to bring in the animation, we want to bake the animation, we want to use a point cache file, which is the one for the flags there. We want to bring in camera, lights, and embed media, the substance map that we did before.
Will come across.
We want to send it as well. Export that. The other thing that I want to do is, because I want to be able to put some text and I want to be able to put the players here on top of the platform, I want to have some 3D reference of where they should be inside of the scene. Locators, exactly. So I've got my platform, I've got my object here. So what I'll do is I'll just go into creation mode, and I'll just go in standard primitive, and I'll just create a helper, a point helper, go in auto grid, and auto grid allows you to start creating from any surface. I'm going to go here and say, I want to place a point helper there, and I want to place a point helper at the top here, and maybe rise it up a little bit so that it stands
because they're
above.
jumping up in the air.
Exactly. So now we've got all this done. Grab the camera, grab the target, and I am ready to export. Export selected, and we're just going to again give it a name, so save that. We want to save the animation because the camera is animated. We don't have any point cache in there, so we don't
turn that off.
We want to export the camera. We don't have any light. We don't have any embed media. It's just locators, so we're minimizing the file size. Ready to go. Export that to Smoke. We've done all of our layers.
We pressed
rendered. We took a coffee, and then we're ready to go back to Smoke.
So let's go back to Smoke. We'll have Louis walk back across to the Smoke on the Mac workstation.
Yep.
Where we've got all those elements that have been rendered out, and the 2D render passes are all available now to be assembled. And then we'll also take a look at the import of the geometry and the 3D capabilities of Smoke.
Exactly. All of that in 15 minutes. So
it's unbelievable.
So we've got
you're a machine.
We've got our light beams here rendered. We've got a few passes for fireworks. Like I said, we've rendered that out. We've rendered the crowd here, and we've created an alpha channel, and we're going to all use that to create our final shot. So what I'll do here is, if I want to combine these, we've got a tool in Smoke called Action, and it's your best friend to bring everything.
It's a 3D environment. It's a fully 3D environment.
So for me, that's where I felt right at home because I was able to bring everything together, and I was able to work in 3D, which was my favorite part of the whole thing. So I'm going to go here in Action, and I'm going to start from a blank. I'm going to go clear all. And what I need to do in Action, I need to bring, for every clip that I bring, I need to bring the RGB and the alpha. If I don't have alpha channel for these, I can take the luminance value as the alpha. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to go take this as the foreground and the matte, foreground and matte, foreground and matte, foreground and matte. This one here has a specific matte. So I'm going to say foreground, matte, and then I'm going to say here background, and ready to create my, so
everything's put together.
Everything is put together. Because of the order that I picked it gave me exactly what I wanted. So what I want to do now is I want to adjust a few things. So if I want to adjust the light beam, for example, I'm going to go here and say we have a color corrector. So if I double click on the color corrector, it's going to bring me, double click here, and we can work in context as well by going here in context, so I can see the whole scene, and I can see my light beam, and I can go here and say, well, I want that to be a little bit stronger, so I can adjust that.
It's great to work in context.
Exactly. So I can know how it contrasts with the rest of the. So all of these adjustments for every single media that is here, we can adjust that. But it's not only about the media inside of Action. I'm just going to switch here to a 2 view, and we're going to go into the schematic view. You'll see that here we've got all of these are locators or access points. They're just the point, they're positioned in 3D space. All of these are surfaces in 3D space. So if I go here and I show you, if I go into working view and we orbit around, we see that what we're actually looking at is a camera that looks at all of these objects that are at 0, 0, 0, because when we imported, they were all placed at 0,
by
0.
default.
So I want to create a 3D environment with this so we have a bit more depth to play with. So if I go here and say position, you see that we can move it forward or backward. I want that to always stay within the camera frustrums. I'm going to say on all transforms, scale. So if I bring it back, you see that's always going to scale up and down so that visually it stays the same. So I'm going to bring it back a little bit like that. Going to grab this one. Whoops. Going to bring that back as well. Grab this one here on all transform, bring it back as well. grab this one here, all transform, bring it back as well. So we've created a 3D space, even if it looks, even if it's a 2D, only 2D rendered clips. So now they're all, we've played with their orders. I'm just going to say Z-sort so that they're all going to be drawn correctly in the right order. And we can go back here to the complete scene, and that's what we have. So we have exactly the same thing, but they're all layered in 3D space, so we can do a lot more with that. So what I want to do here is I want to go and I want to do some lighting effects. So if I go here in relighting, I'm just going to bring in a light, and you see that we have a light and we can affect our scene. The reason why you would use something like this is, let's say that the crowd was too bright or too dark, or maybe you want the stadium to be brighter. You can make these decisions still in Smoke and make some final adjustments.
And also specific lights can come across through FBX. So
yes.
directional lights.
Yeah, we're going to see that in when we're going to be to the fly. So I'm going to bring that to the back. It's just going to light my whole scene. And I want to create another light, bring it in. And that light here, I want it to affect only the front layer. So if I want to do that, I'm just going to go into the lighting tool here and say that light will affect only the front. Then I can go back here and say either it's going to be in front of the layer or in back of the layer. So the reason why I'm putting it back is, remember that when we exported from 3ds Max, we wanted to use the alpha channel for something. So this light will respect the alpha channel of the stadium. So what I can do now is go into the lighting and say I want to grab the rays. As the light is selected, you'll see that it's going to create those rays, and those rays will respect the alpha channels. If I just go ahead and spread that, you see that it captures the crowd here, and it gives me the effect of the crowd.
These are volumetric rays inside a 3D space, and you're able to adjust them, and they do natural occlusions.
Exactly. So I'm going to reduce the density here like that, and I'm going to bring the object rays, and the object rays will kind of capture the edge color, so it's going to give me a nice ray that will capture the color around of that alpha channel.
So this is what we're talking about finishing. When we talk about finishing elements that have been rendered out, now you're trying to sweetening them and integrating them and creating that atmosphere.
Yes, exactly. So we want to animate this. I'm going to go here. I'm going to bring it to the right side, go like this, something like that, and go at the end here. And we're going to bring it to the left side and just animate it so that it does something like that. And in the middle of the animation, I'd like this to point like right into the camera, which is already pretty much what we have here, something like that. And we've got our animation of this.
And it's quick. You can just scrub the timeline.
Exactly. So just to mention something, we have time, so I'm just going to go here. We see right now we're looking at the scene through a default camera, which is this camera here. But I can create another type of camera, which is the Fbx camera. So I'm going to bring that in here, and we're going to make sure that we look at the scene through the camera. So here, camera. You see that we're looking at that camera now. So it has all the default settings of the same one, so we're looking exactly the same way at the scene. But there's a tool here called Mono. If I switch to stereo, this camera is now a stereoscopic camera.
Right.
And so if I turn on anaglyph, you'll see that we get all the anaglyph.
Yeah.
And those rays here are 3D as well. So they're going to come to you toward the screen.
So it's that easy to take any mono scene and turn it into a stereo scene just like that. Broadcasters need to be able to do that all the time.
Exactly. So because we've layered them and we've pushed them in Z-space, it's automatically going to recognize that. So if I grab the front here and I move it forward, you'll see that not only it's going to affect the whole thing, but you see that as I'm bringing it forward, we start to see some pixel separation.
Right.
Because we're bringing it forward to the camera, and it knows how to interpret that. So very quick way to turn 2D things. 2D
Smoke is ready for stereo right out of the gate, and it's easy to use as well.
Yeah. So in this case here, we're not going to do that. So I'm going to go back to my camera, my default camera. We're going to export as 2D or create a clip for 2D. So the workflow is now we're working in 3D. We want to bring this onto our timeline. We have different ways of processing. We can process, it's just going to create a clip, or process and create history. Create history will be very important for anything that we want to update and make multiple versions of once our timeline is done.
Right.
So right now, I don't need to update anything in there. I'm just going to say process, and it's going to create the clip for me, and I'll be able to assemble it later in the timeline.
Right.
So now that this is done, we want to create a new setup. We're going to start to bring other layers that we want to combine together. So I'm just going to reset everything here, start back from scratch. Then we're going to go into 2 view, and you see that it's completely empty. We're going to start from a new one. So what I'll do now is I'll import what we've done in terms of FBX. So my bookmark are gone. So let's go back here. And
was it you're looking for FBX instead of 3ds?
I'm looking for the root here first, and then go to the volumes, the hard drive, the users.
We launched with the different users.
And Smoke,
First demo of the day. So.
And the documents, and here's my name, and here's my FBX file.
Now make a new bookmark.
Yeah, I will make a new bookmark here, add that.
That's good to see.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So we have our two FBX files, so the flags and the position. So I'm going to grab the flags here, load them in, and you'll see that what we get from the scene is exactly what we've exported. We've got the lights, the light effect there. I'm going to turn on the shading here so we can see the shading and the effect of the light. So you see the effects of the light that we got there. We've got the camera move. We've got the animation of the flags. Everything's coming through. So if I grab the Fbx camera and I say I want to look through that camera, we're going to see that we have exactly the same movement. So we don't have to worry about camera movement or anything because
it's all going to line up.
It's all going to line up in the end with my rendered clips. So my goal is to change the logos there. So we have a material that's already assigned to them, and this material is the substance map that we've done. So you see that we've got the diffuse, the specular, the parallax, all of this is coming in. But I'm not going to use that. I use that as a placeholder for a material, so I'm going to drag this out, and I'm going to start to create a new material. So my geometry is here. I'm going to bring in a material for this one. So it's going to be my material here, there. Grab this one. I'm going to create a separate material so they're different. So my goal now is to bring in images or sequences or whatever that I want to.
Moving video, sure.
Because we've taken the time to do the UV mapping in Max, and we've prepared everything. We don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
It's all going to line up. It's going to apply to geometry. I'm going to go in media here, make sure that we're not creating any new surfaces. We're just bringing images. So we're going to go in media, load from desk, and I've got the product logos that I'm using today. So we got Smoke, we've got 3ds Max, we've got Motion Builder, we've got Mudbox.
These are all the products you've shown us so far.
Exactly. So I'm going to bring in Smoke, and I'm going to bring in 3ds Max, go back here, and we see that we've got our logos here. So the Smoke logo, I'm going to turn the matte off so that it's perfectly opaque. Same thing here, I'm going to turn the matte off so that it's perfectly opaque. So if I go back to the node bin, go to the maps, if I want to put a 3ds Max logo on the left flag, you see this is left, this is right, kind of inverted, but you know, I've inverted them since, until like 12 years old, so that's
that's fine.
So I'm going to grab this here, load it in here. We've got the Max logo there. I'm going to grab this other material, and actually that's not the one that I want. I'm just going to cut this here. I want to grab this and put the Smoke logo, diffuse map, and now we've got the Smoke logo, and we got that animated.
And again, it's easy, it's gestural. This is really straightforward 3D, but very powerful inside an editorial finishing workstation.
So now we're in 3D space. We want to send that onto our timeline. I'm going to add the matte to be able to combine all of these layers together in the timeline. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm generating a matte output and also the complete scene output. Because we want to be able to change this later, we want to be able to access these later and change that. This time, I'm not going to process only just a process. I'm going to process and create history.
Right.
So this clip will be processed, put onto the timeline, and I'll still have access to all these tools to be able to change that.
Right.
So we're ready to finish this up. So I'm going to go back here and just reset the whole environment. Go into 2 view, and again, we're starting from scratch here. We're just a default camera. So what I'll do is I'll load the setup that I've prepared for the players here. So I've got all of my clips coming in. So we've got our the rendered platform. We've got the 2 guys jumping, where they're here as well, and we've got also a 3D text that is here, and that's going to be the big finally for our the front of our of all our
this is
layers.
where we're now going to incorporate the live action clips.
That's why when we were in 3ds Max, I created a special, I'm going to import that in, so the 3D position, the 2 position that we had plus the camera. So now what we have is all of these. I've got the camera, I've got the player's position, helper, and I also have the 3D text position that I've got here. So I just need to use those to drive all of this.
Right.
So the camera here will be driving oops, hotkeys.
Yeah, still learn. Can you believe he learned this program in 3 weeks? This is
It's
really
the
great.
space between the keys that hit me. Is I think I'm hitting shift and control, but
That's fine. You're doing great.
Okay, so the idea here is I've got this camera driving, and I want to look at the scene through the camera. So I'm going to grab that camera and switch to that. And now what we have is
That's our camera move.
That's our camera move. It doesn't make any sense because we're just starting to put these things together. So this here will follow the camera. So I'm going to grab the axis here and move it forward until it fits the screen. And when it fits the screen, I'm just going to turn the auto transform on. So now if I move it back and forth in space, it's always going to stay there. So now we've got our rendered layer. It's perfect. It's there. Now what I want to do is I want to grab the player's position here, and I want that to drive the position of the players. So now those players are being placed exactly where they should be in 3D space.
Which you set up in Max,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is great.
But the thing is now they're appearing in front of that. So I'm just going to bring this a bit forward until it occludes the player. So that's good. The problem with the players now is that as I rotate, you see that the planes that they're on, or the image sequence that they're on, are turning with the rest of the scene. So I want them to always look at the camera.
Going around them, right. So we want them to look at the camera.
So I'm going to use a look at here, say look at the camera, and now what's going to happen is that they're always going to be facing the camera.
So it's really an expression, but it's just a gestural way of applying it, which is great.
Exactly. The last thing we want to think about is the text. I'm going to do that in the end. But we've got the players here, and if I go to my media, you see that we've got player left, player right, and they are shot in front of a green screen, and we don't see through them. So like we did a color correction, I can go in here and double-click, and it's going to bring me to the keyer.
Right, so access to the keyer, color corrector, tracking, all inside of Action.
Yeah, and I remember 3 weeks ago when you told me that I needed to do a key for this demo, I said, I'm not a good keyer.
Keying is usually something that's very difficult, but I think this shows the power of Smoke.
So basically, it's a 3-step workflow. I'm going to go here, say, I want to grab the green. I'm going to cross over my player. I'm going to grab the green as well to say, this is the color that I want to remove. Go, and it's done.
Beautiful.
So, is that...
The real test is to look at the mat, right?
I'm going to look at the mat here, and we can still adjust that. So I'm going to play with the histogram here, remove the white spot there, and I'm going to bring it in here, and we've got a perfect key.
We got a little bit of extra information there.
Yeah. So we're going to go and create a garbage mask. And the garbage mask will allow me to just create multiple points there, something like that, something like that.
So garbage mask integrated into the keyer where it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So
turn off the color and make it outside, and now we've got a perfect mask. And I'm just going to scrub in here. We see that we got some elements here that are showing, so I'm going to bring that up.
But imagine, I mean, this is, if you have to do a lot of keying, this is a really great tool for that.
Yeah,
it's fast.
It's part of the, like you say, it's all in one, so I don't have to worry about going anywhere else. I'm just doing it here in Smoke. I'm going to return.
And once you've done it for the first guy, you can easy to repurpose it for the second guy.
They were shot in exactly the same condition, so there's no reason to do it again. So I'm just going to go grab the keyer, copy, go and paste, and it's going to grab and it's going to paste the keyer. So if I double click on the keyer, it's going to bring me here. And of course, you know, it maybe the movement was not exactly the same, so I can go back here and say, well, the mask should be a bit different, so I'm going to update that here. And I go to the end, and pretty good. So we're good with that. I'm going to return, and now we've got our 2 players jumping above, and we're good to go. So the
3D text?
The 3D, but before we do that, the players are not exactly in the position where I'd like them to be. Whoops, undo this. I'm going to grab the player itself, grab the player's axis here.
Oh, right.
And just going to place it where, you know, I'd like it to be. So just a bit above like that, maybe to the left. I'm going to grab this guy here, maybe a bit to the right, and maybe a bit higher, and just a bit in the back. So now that this is done, again, it's Z-sort, and we've got our 3D effect like so. I want to be able to grab in the 3D text as well. So we've got the position for the 3D text. Same idea. I'm just going to connect that here. And just to show you, we're just going to bring this a bit backward so we can see. Our 3D text is going to follow, something like that. Right. And if I want to change the text on it, I'm just going to turn off Auto Key here.
There we go.
Grab the text and just say something like tonight at 7. Enter. And now this is going to be tonight at 7. And we are going to process that text with history so that we can change it a bit later.
For our versioning. So we're going to jump out of Action. We've shown a lot of the functionality of Action here. And now it's time to wrap up. We've got maybe a minute and a half left. You're doing great, Louis. Why don't you just take us through how you would just assemble everything back on the timeline?
Yeah, so we've got all our clips here. You see that we've got history for our text, and all of these have been provided when we were in Action. So I'm going to go grab this here, bring it onto my storyboard, and I'm going to go into the record timeline, and I want to pile them up. So this is my record area here. So that's what we have so far. We have the white flash, and we've got what we've prepared at the beginning, but I want to replace that with my own content here. So I'm going to create a few layers. So I'm going to create 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, and I'm going to start to bring them in at 0, so at the beginning of that sequence. Grab this. This is going to be on my background. I'm going to grab the flag here. I'm going to put them on top of the background. Now we don't have a transparency channel, so I'm going to go here and grab for this one here, grab the axis, and grab the map, and grab this one here. I'm going to grab the players here as well. Grab this. Put the mat, grab the mat.
Simple process here. You just dragging and dropping them down.
Drag and drop, again, axis, and pick the mat. And now we've got our full sequence assembled together like so. and
Amazing.
ready to be versioned. So that's going to be the last part. We've got 20 seconds left. So this is my final.
It's amazing.
Here we go. We've got our final. And I'm going to start to create a few versions out of that. So I'm going to bring this here in my timeline. I'm going to go into the collapse view. That's going to be my version number 1, which is going to be tonight at 7. I'm going to copy this. That's going to be, something else, and I'm going to copy this and make multiple versions.
And then jump back into history and replace your text.
So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to grab this one here, go into the flags, double click into history. Yeah, confirm. I'm ready to go back into history. It's going to bring back action. You see the media here that we have. So if I look at this through the camera, this is our media still. And if I go into at the bottom of my media, grab the Smoke logo, say replace, and I'm going to replace that by the Motion Builder logo. And I'll do the same thing with 3ds Max. Replace this by the Mudbox, and we've got replacement. If I exit this, it's going to be updating inside of the timeline. Yeah, confirm, no problem.
And we've got
our final version just to show you because we're done with the time. So we've got tonight at 7. We've got next week with the logo, and I can create as many versions as I want.
That's beautiful.
And
we're going to see a full demo of Smoke coming up next. So really want to just wrap up. Louis, I can't thank you enough for what a great demonstration that was.